The Troubles in Ireland right now. Round 12,472,000. Ding. Okay, people, strap in, because this one's a doozy, and I'm going to try and give a little bit of a brief history to all the problems that have led up to the issue we see developing between the Northern Irish and the UK and Ireland right now. All right? It's not going to be perfect, and I may mess up a couple of things or details or forget some guy named Paddy O'Paddy who was significant somewhere, but this is just to try and add a little bit of context to everything we're seeing right now. I'd also like to give a shout out to Future History's channel for doing an excellent job on the videos on this. I mean, check him out if you want any more detail than what I'm about to say. He's great. All right, because there's a lot. All right, so disclaimer done. You ready? So the Troubles was a 30-year period of sectarian violence, and the source goes all the way back to 1169, all right? So strap in, guys. And the Norman conquest of Ireland, where British and Irish leaders were in conflict, especially peaking at the Protestant Reformation, where most of the English became Protestant and most of the Irish stayed Catholic. The conflict continued to the 16th century, where the rebellion took place and saw efforts to assimilate the Irish by replacing them with the British, changing who the Irish actually were, sending Brits to the island to colonize it, and had success in the north, which is now known as Ulster, or Northern Ireland, that belongs to the UK. Then came the English Civil War and the Glorious Rebellion, where the Catholic Irish teamed up with the losing side this time, and had penal laws placed on them by the English Parliament, followed by the Great French War, where the French tried to provoke Protestant rebellion for Irish independence, causing the British government to claim Ireland as part of the kingdom again and bring it under its control by force. The Catholics made to live on and off the poorer land. Then we had the Irish potato famine in 1845, with 1 million deaths largely exacerbated by the British mismanagement, willful or not, leading to the Irish demanding an Irish Parliament for home rule, a government of Ireland within the UK. And the bill passed in 1912 under much scrutiny of the Ulster Loyalists in Northern Ireland. But all of this was put on hold for World War I, except for the Easter Uprising in 1916 against the UK, but that failed. The insurrectionists that were caught were killed via firing squads and became martyrs, celebrated and painted on walls, leading to 73 members of the Irish Republican Party, called Sinn Féin, you may know that name, being elected to the UK Parliament in 1918, but they refused to attend the Parliament in London, instead wanting to form an Irish Parliament in Dublin in 1920. This sparking the War of Independence, where a Republican army was formed to fight for that independence. And these tensions led all the way up to the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1921, which split Ireland into North and South, Catholic and Protestant. Most people were unhappy with the situation on both sides, sparking conflict between the North and the South, and even between those living within each region. And then, over decades, the segregation just became normalized, in hiring for jobs and education and housing, with each side rarely mixing. And after 40 years of tensions and fighting in 1960, Northern Ireland voted for the Civil Rights Movement, highlighting inequalities between the regions. Protests led to riots, and tensions rose throughout the 1960s, climaxing in 1969, whereupon a Protestant parade wanted to move through a Catholic area, Londonderry, which led to street battles. The Battle of Bogside, with hundreds of police and civilians and freedom fighters from both sides being injured and caught in the crossfire. On the third day of writing, the Northern Irish Prime Minister requested British troops to relieve officers, to be a neutral force to bring peace to the area. But soon, the Nationalists and the Loyalists began clashing again, and the army was not able to maintain order. And this led to the IRA splitting into two factions, the newer Marxist IRA versus the Traditionalists, who became the Provincial IRA, leading to the Battle of St. Matthews, where the IRA beat back Loyalist forces, a huge propaganda win for the Unionists. The UK army looked to disarm violence by entering Falls Road and that area, a nationalist stronghold, which led to the death of 4 civilians and mass rioting and violence to break out all over again. In 1971, Operation Demetrius, sounds Greek, began, which sought to intern paramilitary members, but also had a nationalist slant, leading to violence and reported torture, with many being imprisoned without trial. 2 IRA members were killed. Then 2 soldiers, UK, were killed, and many civilians, over 20, caught in the crossfire. In January 1972, the army and the police were deployed to oversee an anti-internment march in Derry, where tensions were high. But the British paramilitary officers present were despised for their role in killing 11 people during Operation Demetrius. People threw rocks at the forces, who then opened fire on the crowds, devolving the whole situation into blood and chaos. 28 people were shot, 14 died, leading to a real hatred of the UK and its army, a historic day known as Bloody Sunday around the world. The civil rights movement disappeared, and so did moderation, and many people flocked to the IRA. 1972 had some of the bloodiest conflicts and the worst violence the British Army had seen so far. The IRA orchestrated 22 car bombings around Belfast, killing 9 people, soldiers, police, civilians. The army made 58 arrests, some being correct, some being unjustified, but easy, and leading to the death of 1 IRA militant. Loyalist paramilitary forces set up checkpoints to watch their streets or look for IRA spies, only leading to more violence. No-go areas were set up, but were disbanded by British forces as quickly as possible, with one of the worst incidents being in 1973, an IRA bombing of London, killing 1 person and injuring hundreds. In 1974, the Sunningdale Agreement was put forth, permitting an Irish government advisory role in Northern Ireland, the Northern Irish Parliament to be disbanded, and the House shared between the Nationalists and the Loyalists equally. The Loyalists disapproved of this, saying that the British were giving in to IRA violence, leading to back-and-forth violence between the 2 regions for decades to come. Hunger strikes became prevalent in the late 70s and 80s, where Irish POW status was to be taken away and those inside prison were to be treated as regular prisoners, leading to tensions between the Irish and Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England, who refused to bow to their demands. She saw them as criminals and wouldn't compromise, leading to 10 dead from a hunger strike. As retaliation, the IRA bombed the Grand Hotel in Brighton in 1984, narrowly missing the Prime Minister, but killing other people in the building, leading to the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985, promoting cooperation between the 2 regions, but equally hated by both. There were bombings back and forth with attacks from the IRA and also the British Army. 25 years of retaliation and violence, only broken by a historic ceasefire in 1994. But in 1996, the IRA began having doubts and breaks the ceasefire with bombings on the Canary Wharf at London. This effectively helped Tony Blair win the election, and with a new government, led to new talks between the 2 hostile forces. Though this was disrupted by a loyalist Orange Order parade that wanted to move through a nationalist area, the British government allowed it, causing the worst rioting seen since the riots over the hunger strikes in the 80s. But unlike so many times before, negotiations held, being called the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, with Northern Irish government wanting to focus on power sharing. The RUC effectively became the police and was watched by an independent commission for bias. One of the main points of the whole treaty was that if Ireland ever wanted to reunify, Britain would stand out of its way. Weaponry was decommissioned, prisoners released, and over 30 years of fighting came to a halt, with 3,500 deaths spanning the bloody history. And then Brexit happened, where it seems Ireland has gone from arguing about religion and British rule to arguing about Brexit, politics, and the EU ruling over them, still in religious tribes. The Loyalists recently demonstrated outside the Irish government offices in Belfast, the Loyalists being angry at post-Brexit trade arrangements, creating barriers and bureaucracy on trade between Northern Ireland and the UK, fueling tensions. 88 officers have been injured earlier in the month, and a week of clashes at a place ironically called the Peace Wall on Springfield Road. Hundreds of rioters were met by police armed with riot gear, canine protection, and water cannons, with some of the rioters being as young as 13 years old. So these demonstrations and violent clashes were fueled by a decision not to prosecute 24 Sinn Féin members for COVID breaches after they attended an en masse Republican funeral. Another reason was that some loyalists held concerns that they were missing out on the gains of a peace process in relation to jobs or investment or housing, with one of the biggest issues being the Irish sea border crisis, or Article 16, which is the term of Brexit, stating that if issues of trade between the UK and Northern Ireland become too complicated, Article 16 can be invoked to ease the bureaucracy and complications to help trade continue, with mounting evidence suggesting that the Northern Irish are increasingly not being able to buy certain UK products, or even arrange shipments from companies as ginormous as Amazon. Compounded by the fact that the EU is so angry at the UK, it's doing everything in its power to try and make life as difficult as possible, because of a democratic vote. Now, with Brexit on the way, Italy thinking about it, Greece starting to scratch its head, and Poland putting its toes in the water. These countries effectively swing a fire poker around a room and yelling, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts!" Ha!